what we're seeing at the federal level. And now we are so excited to get to hear about South Coast Together and the Arizona ACEs Consortium. Again, we know, and the reason that we're so excited about RISE and what CTIPP's vision is that healing happens in the grassroots. And we want to leverage these federal dollars to support action at the state and local level that helps to really nurture those relationships that bring about healing, because we know that healing happens in the context of relationships over time. And so with that, we are thrilled to hear about South Coast Together. Together is a collaborative community capacity development initiative in the South Coast area of rural Southwest Oregon. It is designed to improve community well-being and build community capacity by providing no-cost trainings and awareness-building workshops about ACEs and resilience, along with activities to engage and empower families and local residents to collaborate on key issues in their neighborhoods and workplaces. This presentation will provide an overview of the initiative. It will also highlight a guide developed by South Coast Together for parents and caregivers called Help That Helps. Presenting is Bob Lieberman and Renee Menkens. Bob and Renee, I will let you both introduce yourself. Thank you for being with us again.
Well, thank you, Jesse. Thanks for that very kind and gracious introduction. I'm Bob Lieberman. For most of my career, I was the head of a multi-service mental health organization, which has psychiatric residential treatment as part of it. But we actually addressed the whole, served the whole continuum from 0 through 24. And the last few years after I left that role, I was there for 40 years. I started my own training and consulting business. And I'm just going to take a moment to give you the context of the Oregon South Coast, and because we're going to be referencing a couple other initiatives on the South Coast, two of which have presented here at CTIPP back in January. We heard from John King from Southern Oregon University, and we'll be mentioning him. That is in the Rogue Valley of Southern Oregon. That's the two counties are called Jackson and Josephine. And then in February, we heard from Peter Buckley, and he's the head of another community resilience building initiative called Southern Oregon Success. And so, and we're going to, there's a mountain range in between that community, the Rogue Valley and the South Coast. And I'm going to turn this over to Renee Menkens, who is the co-chair of South Coast Together, to give you kind of a sense of the beautiful Southern Oregon South Coast. Some people have been mentioning how beautiful it is in the South Coast. You can see the bay and the bridge behind Renee there. So Renee, take it over.
All right, thanks, Bob. Well, my name is Renee Menkens, and I've been involved with South Coast Together for about 5 years, almost from the beginning, not quite. Bob's been there a little longer. And I've been the co-chair of South Coast Together for 2.5 years. And I just really want to give you a little sense of the excitement that we have with sharing this guidebook. About a year ago, we started working on it. It's taken almost a year to get this out the door and ready, and it's neat to be able to debut it with the CTIPP group. I've been a nurse for over 30 years. I've worked in behavioral health and in public health over the past 30 years, and have also been a faculty at a university and community college in the area. So let's move on to the next slide. This gives a little teaser to the Help That Helps guide. And what we want to really give you a perspective about is that this guidebook really is meant for use by professionals, but really for parents and caregivers, grandparents, anyone who's dealing with children. That as I worked on it over the past year, I kept reflecting that if I'd had this when my children were young, maybe things would have been better. So it's kind of a nice resource that I'm hoping that will be very helpful to others. So a little bit of background about South Coast Together. I don't want to go too much into this because I really want to make sure that Bob has time to share the actual guidebook. But you can get a sense, this is one of our beaches. It's absolutely gorgeous between the mountains and the ocean. How do we take the beauty and create a healthy populace with that too? And this is sort of our mission as we move forward with South Coast Together, is how do we take this rural area, Coos and Curry County and a little bit of Douglas County, and really provide information, resources, support that can help us create self-healing communities and reduce trauma among our young families and children. So when we think about the South Coast, it's not a very large area. And you can go to the next slide, Bob. In Coos County, there's about 65,000 people, in Curry about 23, and a little bit of Douglas County on the coast. Douglas County kind of spreads from the coast into the valley, is about 5,000 people. So it's about 133 miles from where we start to the California border, about 93,000 people. And in 2018, one of the first things South Coast Together worked on with ACE Interface was a key informants report. ACE Interface interviewed about 30 people coming from all walks of areas, from community members to social services, healthcare, and other areas, to really get a feel for what are some of the pluses and strengths of our area and what are some of our challenges. And so what we found is it's a great region, it's extraordinary, but the economic drivers keep changing. Unemployment goes up and down over the past decade. It's always a challenge. We're a timber economy, and now we're morphing into something else, as timber is harder to cut and use. We're also developing new ways of creating shared identity across counties. Coos and Curry County are similar but very different, and how do we work together in a way that makes sense? One of the interesting outcomes of the pandemic is we've been using Zoom like this more in our local area, so it's been able to bring people together in ways that we weren't as easy to do before. Also, we've got strong community partnerships. We have a lot of social services and agencies in the area that really are helping to support people that need help, but it's always funding are always issues around how that can do the work that's needed. And recognizing that we do have differences between the counties, and we need to honor that. Some of the challenging themes have to do with poverty, mental health issues, childcare issues, unemployment, and lack of affordable housing, just to name a few. So those are things that continue to affect our area. One of the other issues on the next slide is, as we think about what's been happening in the last 5 years to 10 years, is a context of healthcare and education in Oregon is morphing. Oregon was one of the first states to have coordinated care organizations through a Medicare waiver that we started receiving about 9 years ago. And this really was an asset to providing healthcare for a very large, over 20,000 people in Coos County, to have access to healthcare in our area. We really are trying to maintain a focus on equity, really look at social determinants of health. Trauma-informed care and systems of care is a major thread throughout the coordinated care organizations, and especially in our area. The other thing that we are required to do as part of the coordinated care organizations and many of our healthcare agencies is a health improvement plan. We're on our second version. And this one that we created in 2019, and it goes through 2022, prioritizes community outreach and engagement as one of the main blocks of focus, as well as adversity, trauma, and toxic stress. So South Coast Together fits in very well with this. And the other piece that's been very exciting for us as we've been engaged with our backbone agency, South Coast Educational Service District, is the prioritization in Oregon Department of Education around social emotional learning and trauma-informed care. So a lot of what South Coast Together does really fits well with what our school districts are doing in both Curry and Coos County, and gives us opportunity to really make an impact with families, parents, teachers, and others in the area. So Bob, I'm going to turn it back to you to talk a little bit about our project design at South Coast Together.
Great, thank you, Renee. So this South Coast Together began, I guess, emerged in 2017. What had happened is over on the other side of the mountains that I mentioned earlier, in the Rogue Valley, Southern Oregon Success had gotten started. That was another community resilience building initiative. And they were using the ACE Interface self-healing community model of providing no-cost training to build awareness of ACEs in the community and of the impact of overwhelming stress and trauma. Teaching the neuroscience, epigenetics, adverse childhood experience science, and resilience science. So the folks on the coast heard about this, and there are a lot of trainings happening. Peter mentioned that in his presentation in February, Peter Buckley. And so a group was convened by the local coordinated care organization. At the time it was called Western Oregon Advanced Health. It's now changed its name to just Advanced Health, took out the Western Oregon. They convened a meeting of about 40 community partners on the South Coast to talk about how can we get some ACEs education, some ACEs awareness over here to Coos and Curry counties, to these two counties. So I attended that meeting because I was very involved in the genesis of Southern Oregon Success, the beginning of that project. And then Laura Porter from ACE Interface, she's been on some of these calls. We've heard about Laura and ACE Interface from actually several communities around the country and the great work they've done across the nation. So Laura and I went down to Coos Bay, that's the largest town on the South Coast, had a meeting with these partners who got very, very excited. So there was a collaboration afoot. Southern Oregon University, that was John King that I mentioned earlier, was wanting to become a trauma-informed university, and they wanted to bring the ACE Interface curriculum into the university and train some of their professors and some of their students and student service people. And Rogue Community College, which is also in the Rogue Valley, was also part of that. So there was some funds already raised to bring ACE Interface in for a master trainer training with Laura Porter and Dr. Rob Anda. So what happened in the South Coast is the agencies attending this meeting got really, really excited. And a challenge match was put out on an email, and several agencies came and contributed $5,000 to the funding to bring ACE Interface into the community and to begin this project. So with that beginning, we had a nice collaborative beginning from community partners. We hosted a master trainer training. I think several folks in the call have probably experienced this with Laura and Rob. And then subsequent to that, we convened a steering committee to start a self-healing community initiative project. And the primary funder here was the coordinated care organization, Western Oregon Advanced Health. And as Renee was saying, in the Oregon health plan system, it's a capitated system. It focuses on outcomes. It recognizes that social determinants of health are part of people having good health. Healthcare is only part of it, but what happens in the social determinants are part of it. And so they expect communities to reinvest money into the community. And what the CCO did on the South Coast was help get the South Coast together up and running. So the project design for the South Coast was first and foremost to build the awareness of the impact of overwhelming stress and trauma across the South Coast through no-cost trainings. That's part and parcel of the ACE Interface approach. We want to get the awareness out. The way I would put it is we know we're doing well if the nail technician goes next door to the clerk in the convenience store in a strip mall and says, do you know what I learned last night? We want to get the information out into the communities. And then to use the self-healing community model, which really focuses on generating ground-up community and neighborhood strategies to kind of lift all the boats in the community to join with what the professionals are doing. So it's not just a top-down approach, but a ground-up approach at the same time. So what we did is we established a steering committee and some initial subcommittees. Those subcommittees have changed more recently, but there were 3 committees, which was the group of trainers who have been trained to present this curriculum, a communication, how we're going to get the word out about what we're doing, and a committee that was looking at metrics. So Renee is going to tell us about the vision and mission that we developed.
So as you can see, our vision is rather broad. We wanted to create intergenerational healing and well-being, and so that all who live here will thrive. And our mission is to foster community engagement, collaboration, to prevent ACEs, and to promote resilience in both Coos and Curry counties. So our guiding principles are, again, very lofty in a sense, but also very manageable, like to develop an understanding of a self-healing community through education and supporting children in reaching their full potential, engaging the community in building common language and understanding about ACEs, and looking for opportunities for learning. We've been involved with family and parent cafes. We've done trainings and workshops over the past several years. And our goal right now this year is to do 40 trainings over the next year, which is manageable, I think. We're working on it. We also want to develop a self-sustaining organization for South Coast Together with volunteers, engagement with community, and partnerships with local organizations and agencies, and develop our relationships with grant makers, which I think is very important. We've had some accomplishments over the last several years that I think are, whoops, what did I miss? Oh, before I get to that, let me talk about our community partners. We have a rather broad group of people involved with this, from healthcare, schools, human services, and community organizations. And you can see that we get funding from a number of them, but we also have people involved with working with us from others. So we have this both funding support as well as volunteer support and in-kind support from our partners. One of the things that we wanted to talk about is a few of our accomplishments over the years. We've alluded to a little bit of that. So you can go to the next slide, Bob. Trainings and presentations. We've worked with about 2,000 people so far. We've had train the trainer sessions for individuals in Coos and Curry County, as well as other counties in Oregon. We've had family cafes that brought grandparents into the discussion about their challenges in raising grandchildren and balancing parent and child needs, as well as other issues such as gun safety, which is kind of an important issue in our part of this the country. We've done public screenings of the movies Paper Tigers and Resilience with community discussion following that. We've moved to a new backbone from our coordinated care organization to South Coast Education Service District. And that's helped us really become more involved in the schools to look at how we can bring trauma-informed presentations to the faculty and the parents. And we did a series of Zoom community forums when the pandemic first started that was very insightful about talking around what's the impact of the pandemic and how is that affecting us from a stress and regulation perspective. And we had some community leaders as well as community members involved in that. We've also partnered with other community capacity building initiatives, and Bob will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And we developed this wonderful parent guide. So our challenges continue, as always with any organization. We need a paid community coordinator. It's really nice to have someone who can really help us keep looking how to bring other people into the process, do trainings, as well as bring steering committee members into our group. Sustainable funding is always an issue. And we really need to look at how do we look at similarities and differences between the counties so we can tailor what we're doing that really meets our Coos and Curry County needs. And I think as we think about coming out of the COVID post-pandemic process is how do we continue to regain momentum for community engagement within our area. So our next steps are implementing some specialized trainings, one on self-regulation and resilience and another one on trauma of natural disasters and resilience, as well as a curriculum around the Help That Helps Guidebook. We also want to enhance partnerships with other Southern Oregon community areas with capacity building. We want to do community outreach, continue and support collaborations with community agencies in both counties. And oh yeah, sustainable funding is important. So with that, I want to turn it over to Bob to really get us into our guidebook and give you a little bit of taste of what that guidebook is about and how it can be really a useful tool, I think, as we look at trauma-informed care.
Okay, and thanks, Renee. And as I do that, I want to emphasize something Renee mentioned a couple of times, which is the partnerships we have with other Southern Oregon community resilience building initiatives. And so I mentioned the one with Southern Oregon Success, and that we heard from Peter Buckley, who I think has joined us about Southern Oregon Success. We have a very close collaboration with them. We've developed those specialized curricula that Renee just referenced in partnership with Southern Oregon Success. More recently, another neighboring county, which is Douglas County, has Creating Community Resilience as their initiative, and they've joined a partnership with us. We've trained a number of people to be presenters of the curriculum. Renee referenced the extended trainings that we've been providing. So we have there's about 50 people, 40 or 50 people in Southern Oregon who can go out and present at least the core talk of this curriculum to small groups, large groups, and it really enhances the partnership. And we expect the partnership to be joined by the final county in Southern Oregon, Klamath County, and their initiative is called Klamath Strong. And so these 6 counties with 4 initiatives in the counties had collaborated together and submitted a request for congressionally directed funding, right along the lines of what the Rise from Trauma Act is really asking, to have community cross-sector coalitions and collaborations. And so we banded together, and what I can say about that is it looks promising that we may get some support from that request from to Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden for congressionally directed funding. So I'm going to go into the Help That Helps guidebook. This the start of this was we went in. I am one of our trainers, and I function as a lead trainer in these initiatives for quite some time. We went to make a presentation to the commissioners of Coos County. That's the larger of the counties on the South Coast, and so we did the core talk, and they had all the department heads there. And in Oregon, if there's 2 commissioners at a meeting or more, then the press is allowed. So often commissioners don't meet all 3 together. But this was all 3 commissioners and the department heads. And they hung around after the 2-hour presentation and talked with us a little bit, talked about the implications. The sheriff was there. The next day, I got a call, an email from the county clerk and one of the commissioners asking if we can find some infographics to put into every marriage packet that they send out from the courthouse when people apply for a marriage license. So they wanted people to understand the importance of trying to prevent adverse childhood experiences and to build resilience for their children. So we began searching around for some infographics, and we were working with Laura Porter of ACE Interface, and we really couldn't find any that we thought was really fitting the needs and fitting the community that we had on the South Coast. And then COVID hit. So a lot of the progress, the momentum that we had built was obviously slowed down considerably by COVID. We had some of those forms Renee mentioned to help stay on the screen. But we resurrected this process, and the commissioners had asked for. And we searched through about 40 different infographics, and Laura was part of this with us, and none of them really hit the mark to what do we want to put into a marriage packet in Coos County. So we decided to write one ourselves, to write a little booklet. And as we put it together, we had a writing team. We had someone who is a young parent and a young person with lived experience, as well as a tribal representative. We had Laura and Renee and I and a couple other folks. It was really a great process to write this guide. So I'm going to go through the guide real quickly and show you what's in it. And it is available for people who would like to get a copy. They're $5 each. There's a plus shipping, so a nominal cost to cover our costs. And I'm going to show you what's in the guide. So here's the cover. Here's a welcome page. And what we did in vetting and reviewing the guide is we sent it out to a large number of people, family members, parent educators, other folks, and got some great feedback. There was one group from Southern Oregon Success where parents said, I feel really terrible about what I did with my children because I didn't know all of this. And so we put something in here in this welcome page about if this is new to you, you're not alone. It's never too late to use this information. Just trying to help people feel more comfortable. And we looked at this, our eye on this was to, we wanted this to get into the hands of parents, including parents who may unfortunately be homeless, and think about how easy would it be for them to access, to read the guide. So we tried to eliminate all contractions. We tried to get rid of 3- and 4-syllable words. We really took a very close look at that. On this welcome page, we also, at the suggestion of one of our community partners in the Rogue Valley at Southern Oregon Success, we put in this little place right here where people who may want to purchase this, the state of Michigan bought about 350 copies of this. Maybe they want to put a local resource. So we didn't want to put Southern Oregon resources. They're right there. So this is a spot where they can put a sticker, or you can get a custom order printing and print in a QR code. One group is doing that. Southern Oregon Success is doing that. So there could be a local resource option for people to look at as they enter the guide. So there's a table of contents. The graphics were done by a group called Youth Era. They are a global, actually, group that does amazing work at helping youth engage with each other and with the system and provide support to each other. All of their staff are peer support, are people with lived experience, so they're peer support specialists. So I'm going to go through the topics here pretty quickly. Here's parenting as teaching. The concept of parents are our first teachers. Every major topic has a reflection. So the reflection here is, what would you like your child to remember about you? Have you ever said something to your child and heard your own parents talking? Of course, we see that on the Geico commercials, but this is hopefully a little bit more of a reflection than the Geico commercials. Then we go into how do experiences shape the brain. The concept of experience sculpts our brain, the developing and growing brain. And we decided to conceptualize this as, rather than get into the details of the brain science, as 3 zones. And the red zone, the yellow zone, the green zone. The green zone, we're calm and able to think clearly. In the red zone, we're emotional, heated, or shut down. So a way of kind of looking at how are we feeling, how are our children feeling. And then there's reflection. What does it look like when your child is in their green, yellow, or red zone? A couple pages on safety, feeling safe and creating safety. The concept that children need to feel safe, seen, and soothed. And how do we create safety? So there's tips for parents, things that they can do to build connection, manage their own reactions, play, encourage, and praise. And again, a reflection. Reflection is, what do you already do? Write down or take a photo of the positive moments you're creating. In other words, build on your strengths. Then there's a couple of pages on stress in the brain and why does stress matter. We wanted to make sure that people understood that we need stress in order to learn and grow. So what's the difference between good stress and bad stress? And in all of this, we took information from some of the great thinkers and scientists and researchers of our time. So you can see some of Bruce Perry in here. When stress is minor and predictable, children learn how to manage it. When stress is chronic, persistent, severe, they're less able to manage day-to-day expectations. The reflection, what type of stress does your child manage well, which might be hard for other children. A couple pages on self-regulation. Why is it important? In order to be able to think clearly, we have to be self-regulated. That's a fundamental principle in the brain science. So what are the tips for maintaining our own self-regulation as parents? And then how can we help our children manage stress? Play together, move together, connect, create with some ideas in there. And what do you do to self-regulate? Is the reflection what works best for you? Some of you who are familiar with the ACE interface curriculum or the movie Paper Tigers may know about this Talk Now, Talk Later bullseye that Jim Sporlater developed at Lincoln School in Walla Walla. And Jim has given us permission to use this. So we kind of explain how that works. And again, we got the red, yellow, green kind of colors to symbolize this. And the reflection is, what can you do when you're in the red zone or your yellow zone to help yourself get to the green zone? So you notice a lot of the focus is on parents. What can we do to regulate ourselves so we can do good work with our kids? We couldn't not mention the ACEs study, but we didn't want to delve into it too deeply. So we talked about why it's important. And we had a reflection about consider your own life and history. What strengths did you have to help you get through the tough times? And then from Dr. Ann Maston, we are addressing the 3 core protective systems of resilience, personal skills, with tips about how do we help children develop their personal skills, and including their self-regulatory skills or self-efficacy skills, those kinds of skills. And what are your child's personal skills? What are your personal skills as a reflection? Second core protective system, attachment and belonging. How do we build attachment and belonging? There's some tips there. Think about how you help your child feel a sense of belonging in your family and how can you increase that? Write down your ideas. And then the third core protective system, community. How do we connect ourselves, our families, and our children with the community? Get involved, volunteer, stay connected, offer and ask for help, honor your culture and your history. And then there's reflection, which community connections are most important to you and your family. And then finally, it's self-care. Some comments about taking care of yourself, because being a parent is a very, very stressful job, and some tips for parents about how they can take care of themselves, and some reflections about what are you already doing to show your children how to take care of themselves in tough times. So then we had, because these little areas for reflection are really quite small, we have 4 pages of notes in the back of this little booklet that people can use if they want to write down reflections or take other notes. And then it ends with gratitude to the writing team, the graphics team, the copy editing team, and especially to deepest gratitude to the scientists, researchers, clinicians, and educators whose work has informed the content of the guides. The logos are for our funding sponsors, and there's a special thanks to our South Coast Together steering committee. So that's the Help That Helps guide. And Renee talked about the next step for South Coast Together. So we can take questions now, Jesse, or we can wait until the end. I'm not sure what you prefer with that.
If it's all right, we'll probably let Angie go first and then sort of coordinate questions. But I have an ongoing list of questions that were put into the chat. Bob and Renee, there was a lot of celebration around the work that you've done. Certainly the guidebook looked very appreciated. For folks on the call, we will be sending out what Bob just shared, both the presentation for Bob and Renee and the guidebook in our follow-up email. If anybody isn't on our email list, I will put my email in the chat, either chat me or email me, and I'll make sure that you're on that to get follow-up emails. But Bob and Renee, thank you so much for the presentation, for the work you do. Truly, truly fantastic.
Thank you.
Next, we have Angie Burleson from the Arizona ACEs Consortium. The mission of the consortium is to build the well-being of Arizona's communities. The Arizona ACEs Consortium supports the human service organizations that monitor and sustain the programs, services, and opportunities from which well-being is built. They also educate Arizona's community and state leaders about preventing the long-term effects of ACEs. This work requires engagement of all sectors and is not an easy task, as I'm sure everybody on this call can appreciate. This presentation will focus on how communities are transforming in ways that put better health within everyone's reach. Hopefully I didn't break up this time, but certainly the siren got in the way. So with that, I will put myself on mute. Angie, it is all yours.
Thank you. So I have questions for Bob and Ray. That's amazing. Number one, you guys did an absolutely fantastic job. And I have lots of ideas. Anyway, we'll connect afterwards, hopefully. So yes, my name is Angie Burleson. I am Executive Director of the Arizona Adverse Childhood Experiences Consortium, or the ACEs Consortium for short. And I've actually just recently been hired as the full-time executive director. So that just happened in July. Before that, I was a part-time contractor for about 2 years. And so we're going to go into a little bit of kind of the history and then what we're doing now. It's really great because there's other Arizona people on the call, like Becky Bendadad, who has been really great support for us. Sang-Hoon that you all heard from last month. And then Marcia Stanton, who was the founder of the consortium, is also here. So for my Arizona folks, if I miss anything, if you want to add anything, please feel free to come off mute and chime in. I am good with that. And so really the consortium kind of started as, how do we move education about ACEs and trauma-informed care forward, right, to help create stronger families. And it's really kind of the underlying backbone of everything that we do, is really how do we get that kind of information out there across Arizona. Arizona has consistently ranked as one of the worst states in the nation for children with 2+ ACEs. We're a very disconnected state. I know that there's disconnection all across the nation in every state, but Arizona has some uniqueness to it in the fact that not only do we have great geographical distance in between towns and communities, our counties are absolutely huge. And we only have 15 counties for the whole entire state. So when you're going from the southern side to one county to the northern side, you're looking at an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours drive within the exact same community. And then you have the geographic separation of a lot of open space, a lot of desert, a lot of forests, depending on where you are. And then also all of our communities are different on so many different levels, right? We have, different biomes and, so some people who are attracted to cooler weather live here. We have, weather like they do, in some of the northern states. And then we have the lowest desert where it is as hot as you could possibly be in here. So we have just a lot of differences within not only our communities, but our geographical distance, and then the people who are attracted to those places to begin with, right? So when we're looking at kind of statewide efforts, we just have to take so many different things in consideration. And so some of the ways that we do that is really focusing on that community and relationship building, and doing that through our committees and our partner organizations. That really is where the bulk of our work kind of is. So a little history about us is we started as a grassroots movement in 2007 by Marcia Stanton through a project through Phoenix Children's Hospital. And it really started out as kind of like a quarterly think tank meetings where the organizations got together. How can we get this information out, right? The ACEs study, this information is so important for all of our community members, especially for our, helping and healing organizations. So how can we, as organizations, really get this movement going, and how can we grow that? How can we build that? The first public event was a press conference in 2014. And since then, we've had annual summits. So just once a year. This organization has been completely unfunded, right? Besides private donations that really kind of went for the annual summits. There was no paid staff. Everything was done by our volunteers and our committees through it. But with that, in our support here in the state, we were able to bring in speakers such as Dr. Folletti and Nadine Burke-Harris and Bruce Perry to really help kind of bring more education and more information throughout our state. In 2015, we partnered with the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family for our 5th annual summit. And it was during that time that our Governor, Doug Ducey here, and First Lady Angela Ducey really committed to having a trauma-informed state, right, in Arizona. And of course, what that looks like is different for all of the agencies. However, they did put that call out. So we were able to get kind of that, statewide, here you go, can you please do this in all of our statewide organizations, right? And then we organized formally as a 501c3 in 2019. So up until that point, it really was just the quarterly meetings and relationship building that we've been able to do through our organizations, right? The main work has really come through our committees and then our partners. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that our partner is Arizona Trauma Informed Faith Committee, which you heard from Sang Hoon last month if you were here, about their network. And that started as a committee through the consortium, right? And it has just grown so big, as had the Southern Arizona Trauma Informed Network. They have actually outgrown, right, what a committee would do through the consortium. And so now we look at them more as a partner organization. And then the work that we do through the consortium is broken up into these committees. Really, we have the Faith Committee, creating trauma sensitive schools, rural community, because we identified that our rural community was not really being responded to in the way that really they needed. A communications committee, our healing historical trauma committee, and then also our ACEs training work group, which works on all of the training that we do. So training started by Marcia Stanton in 2010. That first Strong Communities Raise Strong Kids, Train the Trainer happened. And really the goal was, how can we increase the capacity of ACEs trainers throughout the state of Arizona? And that really has been our underlying thing even until now, is how can we get these information into communities? We know that if you can train within your own community, you understand your community, understand the nuances, and you understand what your community needs the most. And this is just kind of where of what they've been. They've hosted 9 training of the trainers between 2010 and 2015, and had 500 ACE ambassadors. Through the years of 2016 to 2019, we really focused on expanding and restructuring the training. So instead of just doing the ACEs trainer and intro to ACEs training, what could we really bring our communities to help bring in some more of the information, the resilience science, right? The protective factors science. What are some of the things that our community needs? And our training work group worked on 3 years to develop 3 different modules, an intro to ACEs, toxic stress and trauma, and then a building resilience. And during our inaugural training for that, and that was in December of 2019, we were able to train 33 trainers. And then, as we all know, COVID, right? And as all of us have had to do, we've had to flex and adapt to what does this digital virtual world look like for all of us, and how can we continue reaching out and building community and building relationships when we are told that we are supposed to socially distance and we need to move everything online. And so 2020, we pivoted and created our training program from an in-person train the trainer to a virtual train the trainer, which was absolutely amazing because we were able to reach so many more people, right? So we have had people all across the state of Arizona, but we've also had people from other states that have come in that have received this, our certified training of the trainers program. And overall in the last year and a half, we've trained over 250 trainers. And with that, we're able to support them through our own kind of community of practice, where quarterly we get together to do extra, learning and really kind of network with each other and have those discussions of what is working in our community, what are some of the things that we can do. Because everything that we do, we know that if we don't start at that community level, the chances of it growing into something greater is so much less, right? And we all know our communities best. We do. And so our focus has been on that. And then in 2021, we have updated our module 1 to be brand new, and it's the Understanding ACEs and Impacts of Childhood Trauma. As we all know, right, it's preaching to the choir that trauma science and resilient science changes, and every single week and day there seems to be more new studies and more information out. And so it's really important for us here that we stay flexible and that we can identify the gaps and the needs in our communities and help to fill them. We also have a trauma sensitive schools initiative. Last year, Vitalist Health, which is one of our foundations here in Arizona, created a SPARK report. And this was done through a steering committee that had our trauma sensitive schools co-chairs that were on it, and Sang-Hoon was on it, and others that have been working in the trauma informed schools initiative space for the last few years that had created a report, a recommendation of some of the things that we would like to see done in the state of Arizona, so that way we can bring some cohesion and some collaboration within our state, so we can get our teachers and our school districts the support that they need, right? We all know that that this is a really important piece in it, but it's also really hard to get into our schools because our teachers have so many things already on their plate. And so the recommendations for that report was creating a resilience coordinating council, which is just in its start, and then also enhancing school employee wellness and requiring a baseline of knowledge, so we have some consistency across the schools, but then to also establish those funding mechanisms, right? Like, what are some of how can we support our schools? It's really great to say that we need to all be trained, but how do we actually get that done? And how can we incorporate, the mental health needs of our children and of our teachers, and really create that supportive piece behind it. And then our rural community committee, like I've said, we're also separated. and we're all so different. I actually live in the northwestern part of Arizona, and there's 3 larger cities here in this county, and each one of them from each other is an hour to an hour and 20-minute drive with lots of little towns in between. And I know Renee and Bob can understand that being in the West Coast is like, that's just how we are, right? And all 3 cities, even though they're in the same county, are completely and totally different. They do not communicate with each other. They like to do their own thing and have their independence. And so every community looks different into what they needed. So we brought together a committee to talk to our rural community and say, okay, what is it? What can we be doing different? Our stats have shown in Arizona that that our rural communities have a lower incoming knowledge of ACEs into all of our trainings. Typically, many of them, actually the majority of them, have either never heard of ACEs before, or they just know what ACEs stand for. And that's the majority of our people in the state. So we're obviously not doing a great job reaching them. And so looking at how can we do that with our communities. And so we have decided to focus on a statewide film screening. And what that looks like for us is that every community has their own. And it looks different in every single community with some of the same things, right? Like, here is some discussion guide on how we can get the community talking. How can we find resources within our own community? What are some of the things that we can look for? I would love to have the guide that Bob and Renee created to help spur those conversations and discussions right within their own community, because it opens up that reflection piece that we all need to look at. The great thing about our rural communities is they tend to be more invested in their communities. You know, here in Metro Phoenix, I've lived in Metro Phoenix for 27 years, and I've worked in rural communities for about the last 3 years with the consortium now. And the level of commitment in small towns is absolutely amazing, because you can't turn a blind eye to what's really going on. You see everything, right? In our big cities where you have 4.5 million people, it's really easy to just live in your own bubble as if nothing else happens around. And so really just kind of taking that look of what can we do differently? Where are gaps, and how can we fill them so we have more of a cohesion across the state, right? And then the state of Arizona itself, some of the things that we're doing here, from the relationships that have built through Marcia and through the consortium over the years. Our governor has asked our state agencies to become trauma informed. What that has looked like has been different for every agency. As we know, state agencies aren't the easiest. It's like turning the Queen Mary around in Harbor. But the Department of Health Services has an 18-page plan that they released right before COVID, and then COVID. And so it's still moving forward, because the Arizona Health Improvement Plan includes ACEs education and awareness, that the consortium will be leading those groups of how can we get this education awareness, not only out to our community, but within our schools and our other organizations. Trauma-informed plans are a requirement in all state grants. And so the grants that come out, they need to have a trauma-informed component for all of our like healing and helping services, our substance use disorder prevention grants. All of those grants have to have a trauma-informed component within them, which I think is absolutely amazing. And they've also created a role for an epidemiologist that focuses on getting the ACEs data across the state, and being able to compile that and really kind of make the recommendations. And then the Department of Education has just started offering ACEs training as professional development that all of the teachers can access for free. The ASU Morrison Institute for Public Policy also just last year released a report on the cost of ACEs in Arizona, not nearly as comprehensive as California and Tennessee have done. However, I think the total, the calculations speak volumes to what is going on because of how limited the scope was in this report. So in order, the data that they had that they were able to actually create the report from focused on women on Medicaid, so on our state health insurance that had 3+ ACEs, only with the top 4 diseases. So heart disease, chronic lower respiratory disease, stroke, and diabetes. And the costs to our state just with those, that didn't cover private insurance, it didn't cover, personal payment out of pocket, only looking at the 4 diseases, only looking at women with 3+ ACEs, was $260 million in 2019. And so, with that limited data and seeing how high that amount was, we can only imagine what a full comprehensive, cost would be for the state of Arizona. And so there's a lot of great things that are going on. Consortium kind of works on let's pull them all together so that we can all be communicating and not reinventing the wheel, which just takes more time and is a waste of power, but really working together. And so moving forward, what this looks forward is really looking at that, cultivating that trust and building that relationships. How can we build those communities? How can we continue these conversations? And how can we really bring connection to a state that's pretty disconnected? And we do that through our monthly webinars. We still have our quarterly meetings, which, thank you, COVID, we took virtually, and like Renee and Bob was able to have a lot more participation from across the entire state. And so that was a really great plus for us. We were going to focus more on community trainings in 2021 to kind of get that piece done, a deeper dive into ACEs and what do we do now, right? So beyond the awareness, we have the awareness, but what are some of the concrete things that we can do and how can we respond? And then looking at creating spaces for organizations to network within sectors and within communities, right? Because every sector is completely different. What works in the criminal justice sector is not going to work in education. But how can we get everybody talking to each other so we can see what's kind of going on around the state? And then also, of course, having our annual summits, which this year is our first one that is a multi-day one. We have a 3-day conference. And instead of just our daily summits. So we're excited about that. And really just looking forward on how we can continue, building these communities and creating the relationships. And I will thank Sang-Hoon for putting the links to everything in the chat. So he has the links to the Spark report that Vitalist put together on creating trauma-sensitive Arizona schools. And then also the ASU Morrison Institute's Cost of ACEs in Arizona report. So thank you, Jesse, for having us present today.
Angie, thank you. Angie introduced a few people at the beginning of her call or of her presentation rather. And I'm just curious if anybody who was mentioned wants to sort of step in, say anything, totally fine if not, but just opening up that opportunity for those who are also involved.
This is Sang-Hoon. Hi, Jesse. Angie, why don't you share about that, what we did with the governor's office, Youth and Faith and Family, and their grant. We could create online training for all the coalitions in Arizona for substance use prevention, opioid prevention.
Oh yeah, so you mean the project that I was hired to do?
Yeah.
The first start. Yeah, so we were given, and part of the reason we became a more organized organization as we received the grant from GOIFF to create a trauma-informed substance use prevention training for community coalitions. And within that training, we were able to create 7 modules. We worked with substance use prevention coalitions in 13 of the 15 counties in Arizona. We trained, we had coaches that were able to mentor these coalitions on bringing these trainings within their community. And so we had 7 different modules: an intro to ACEs, the link between ACEs, childhood trauma, and substance use disorder. Our 3rd module was creating trauma-informed media campaigns. So we know that just say no does not work in prevention. And so how can we create these substance use prevention campaigns in a more trauma-informed lens, and ones that, actually work with our kiddos. And then the last 4 modules are all collaboration modules. So if you were a community coalition, how could you collaborate with schools, faith community, criminal justice, and direct service providers? And it gave different examples of how that's happening across the state of Arizona. With that, we were also able to take those trainings online. And so at azaces.org/online-training, you can actually access all of those modules for free. They're open source. They're open to the public on our website. And that training was really great, because working with our substance use prevention coalitions, typically they know their community incredibly well, because they're working with their kiddos and their parents and their schools and things. And so we were able to do a lot of fun things and create a toolkit also for all of the coalitions that was able to use a campaign that was trauma informed for the prevention world, and then lots of other educational resources that came through it. Thank you, Sang-Hoon, for reminding me.
That's great. Angie, thank you. Sang-Hoon, thank you for that prompt, as well as being the ultimate helper in the chat. Truly great. You really highlighted the need for different communities' initiatives to look differently relative to the populations, the needs, and the resources that are available, right? And each one's different in the state of Arizona, certainly across the country. I think that was really well represented by hearing about what South Coast Together is doing in the southwestern region of Oregon, as well as Arizona as a state, and what's going on in Arizona communities. I was also reminded of my college baseball days, Angie, when we used to go down to Tucson and drive from Phoenix to Tucson, and the best way to move time along kind of quickly was to watch the mountains just get bigger and then pass, and then the next range was sort of how that worked. So thank you for that little flashback.
Yes.
Thank you both. Incredible presentations. Again, we will be sharing the resources that were just presented on, but want to get into the Q&A with these last 15 or so minutes. As usual, we do generally go a little bit past 3:30 with these, so we'll get through all the questions. But to get started, there was one question about the vaccine hesitancy strategy that I just wanted to touch on really quickly, where someone noted the importance of the topic, but was concerned that this was potentially partisan, right? And just to note, I will get to a point and just clarify a few points, but as she read the memo itself, she acknowledged that we really sort of took down that partisan space, acknowledged political and governmental trauma as one of the traumas. And again, it's about a compassionate avenue to understanding what underlies that vaccine hesitancy, right? But to that point, really quickly, we've tested this in both red and blue states, which is the hesitation we had as well. We didn't want to make this partisan. We didn't want to dismantle the trauma-informed effort and all of the bipartisan support that we have sort of garnered over the past several years. As the memo states, we recognize the various forms of trauma: governmental and political, racial trauma, medical trauma, and pharmaceutical trauma. And these talking points have not been off-putting for red states nor vaccine hesitant individuals. And we've had the conversation with both folks. And most people actually appreciate the recognition of what is behind the vaccine hesitancy itself. So I also saw a comment in the chat that I was breaking up. So just to reiterate some key points here, we're not saying that this will definitely work. And we also want to acknowledge that this approach will take several years, right? We want to say we don't want to overpromise here with the trauma-informed movement and undermine any of the other efforts. We just want to say that this is a very good step forward. We want to let folks know that this would likely be a better use of funds than how they are currently being spent. And as we'll see in the memo, we recognize and believe that we need to be more compassionate about the causes of vaccine hesitancy, which will lead to better results. So I will put the link to the memo in the chat one more time. The last thing that I will say about this is that it provides an opportunity to coordinate several funding streams to support initial launch and sustaining of trauma-informed, resilience-focused, and healing-centered systems of care. If we can leverage American Rescue Plan Act funds now, as opioid settlement funds come out, they can further sustain these efforts. And then if and when the Rise from Trauma Act passes, they can further sustain these efforts. And then we can continue to advocate for more funds in the future to continue to sustain these efforts. And at some point, we will see cost reductions, as we have seen from trauma-informed efforts in the past, that can then be reinvested into community as well. And so that's the importance of leveraging these one-time funds now and really moving towards sustained efforts in the long run. So again, really quickly, just putting the memo itself and sign-on letter into the chat. Please sign on and feel free to share that broadly. And then if anybody has any further talking or conversation that they want to have, because we want to move on to our presenters now and the questions for them, I am putting the Zoom link for our next call in the chat, which will begin at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific, which is the campaign office hours where we can discuss this further. So just wanted to say all that. Now getting back to the more important part of the presentation, which is Angie, Bob, Renee, and the work that you are all doing. I will sort of just bounce between the questions or bounce between both of you with the different questions that came in throughout your presentation. So for Bob and Renee, we had a question from Trisha of, do you have any paid staff? And if not at all, how do you coordinate the work between organizations?
Renee, do you want to take that?
Sure. We do have a few hours of paid staff through our South Coast DSD, our backbone agency. I think we've got about 4 hours a week and maybe about 2 hours of support. So maybe 6 hours total right now. But it's a constant challenge to be able to like I said, sustainable funding is an issue for us, and being able to support that work, which is really critical to help us continue to bring people into our steering committee and keep our trainings going and do some of the kinds of work that we're focused on. So paid staff is critical. We're hoping that if we can get some grant money that we might be able to get a community liaison, which would add to our ability to really engage the community. But it's a work in process, and we're very blessed to have the support that we do have right now to keep us going. So otherwise, I think it would be very hard. Doing something totally with volunteers, I really appreciate, Angie, your comments about that, is challenging and very hard to do. So having some paid staff does make a bit of a difference in keeping the momentum going.
And one caveat I would add into that is I'm a consultant to the.
Right, Bob, how could I forget you?
And so I'm not staff per se, but I am paid. So I do some of the coordinating, for example, with Peter and Southern Oregon Success with the other initiatives. It's more outward from the community facing rather than into the community to do the internal coordinating between Coos and Curry County. But we do have some capacity in a contract that South Coast Together has with me.
Yeah, and Bob's been incredibly helpful to us to keep us thinking ahead and looking beyond our boundaries as to how, and bringing expertise into our work over the years. So thank you, Bob. Sorry, I didn't mean to miss you.
Thanks, Renee. Well, I don't consider myself a paid staff. I do consider myself a consultant. So
Thanks for that. And we can certainly support that as well from CTIPP. You know, we don't have any full-time staff. I similarly am loaned out to the organization. It's amazing what can happen in this movement with just volunteers, right? But we can also imagine what happens if there's more sustained funding, more full-time efforts. Angie, you can probably speak to that. Congrats on the full-time job starting in July. But yeah, that's a need sort of that we see broadly throughout this movement. So thank you for answering that question. Angie, to you, have you used the trauma-informed schools report that you were talking about in Arizona to leverage elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds through either the American Rescue Plan Act or CARES?
No, not yet, but that is one of the missions, right? One of the requirements for the council. So, and we really just received the funding to be able to implement the report, the items in the report. And so we're still in that resilience coordinating council building, and we just identified our co-chairs, which I'm super excited about. We'll be able to start moving forward in November, but that's one of the items on their list, is to leverage that funding.
Well, congrats on all
Thanks.
of the momentum so far, and keep us updated.
Yeah.
Bob and Renee, back to you. From Andrea from SRQ Strong, can you talk a little bit more about the role of the backbone organization that you were discussing?
Let me start this, Renee, and then you can jump in. I would say that overall, the role the backbone has had has been maybe a little bit more hands-on than some backbones would have. So Advanced Health was really, when they were the backbone, Western Oregon Advanced Health, they really kind of took charge, and they were organizing, and they were putting resources into South Coast Together, which really the whole community was very, very much noticing. Both counties very much noticing that the CCO, which, there's a lot of healthcare dollars that go to the coordinated care organizations in Oregon, and they were investing dollars, and they were investing dollars into the six figures at the very beginning to get this going. They decided it wasn't in their business plan to be the backbone for a community resilience building initiative. I kind of argued with them a little bit from my perspective. I prepared a paper that I'm not sure where it got to in their system, but I understood their perspective. They see themselves as an insurance company. So we went through a real process of going out into the community locally and saying, who would like to take over the function of the backbone. And South Coast ESD saw it as really lining up with what they wanted to do to introduce more trauma-informed education and awareness into the whole community, but especially into the schools that they support. So they ended up taking over the backbone function. And maybe Renee, you could talk about how that's working now.
I think it's working very well. We have support through South Coast ESD to help us continue to move our presentations. I mean, we're doing a lot focused on the schools right now, and I hope that we can do more out in the community. But I think even with the focus on the schools, we're reaching the community in both Curry and Coos County with the work that we're doing. So we have some administrative support, we have budget support, we have some grant writing support. I mean, we have some real benefits that would be available through our volunteers, but would take more coordination and work. So it's really nice to have it kind of centralized. And the connection to the schools is really a plus, I think. There's pluses and minuses to any of it, but I think at this point and where we're at, that connection is really positive for now.
Thanks for that. Angie, a question from Renee. We love the presenter-to-presenter networking and questions that can occur. But do you know how was women with 3 or more ACEs identified from the Medicaid population in Arizona?
Yeah, so what they used was they used the BRFSA, the behavioral risk factor, and then they took the percentage of the women that had 3+ ACEs and then aligned it with what percentage of the total cost for each of these diseases, right, through our population. What would that be attributed to if we do that kind of overall percentage piece?
So that's consistent with the science, and also really brings a focus on where should funding and prevention happen.
Yeah.
And Angie, you spoke to, when you were talking about that, sort of how that's probably a low end estimate because it's only looking at 4 of the health conditions, right? I don't know if you want to expand a little bit more on that, and if you leverage that point in advocacy, or as you're sort of spreading awareness around the state at all about the promise of creating trauma-informed and PACEs-informed practices?
Yeah, no, I think it's great in leverage. When we first realized it would be so limited, they were like, I'm sorry, it's so limited. It's like, actually, with it being so limited, it helps them see, like, we're only looking at, right, what was that, heart disease, COPD/bronchitis, stroke, and diabetes. That's it. But those are the only 4 that we're looking for. We're not looking at private insurance. We're not, and this is just for health diseases here. That doesn't account for the substance use disorder, costs, which are behavioral health costs in the state of Arizona, it doesn't account for all of those things. And so being able to utilize that information, I think, almost makes it a little bit more powerful than like a $4 billion number. I mean, who really knows what 4 billion is, right? There's no tangibility to that at all. And they're like, well, of course, that's a lot of different things putting it together. But when we're just looking at 4 in a specific population, just women, partly because men didn't have enough data set for them to analyze, was the reason that they just looked at women. And that was because of the lack of the BRFSA data that had come in too. So, you know what I mean? All of the limitations that we had working for us, and we're still looking at a, $260 million price tag for just 1 year. Being able to use that as an education point, I think, is pretty powerful here. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bob and Renee, 3-part question here. There was a lot of excitement when you were presenting on that handbook. So from Ruth, Cindy, Nancy, so first, what kind of feedback have you gotten from parents on the guide? And do people do the writing reflections? Part 2 is, have you received any feedback on this booklet from new families in particular? And the third question is a reminder of how to get a copy of the guidebook itself.
I'll start, Renee. And we did put this in the chat too. So the guidebook is just in the last 3 or 4 weeks been available for broad dissemination. And so far there's been over 3,000 copies purchased, which are, like Peter's got a plan to get 1,000 copies into the hands of parents in the Rogue Valley across the mountains. We haven't heard much feedback from people who are just getting the guide and using it as to whether or not they're using the reflections and writing in the guidebook. We did get a lot of feedback from parents, including new parents, as part of the process of developing the guide and then introducing it to various folks, mostly in the Southern Oregon region, but around the state, and to a lesser degree in a couple other states in the country. So from families and from new families. And actually, there's 1 or 2 new young families that were part of the writing team who gave quite a bit of feedback about, this is what I would, this is what's going to work for young parents. And there was a young woman with lived experience. I referenced her as part of the writing team. She was very tuned in. She works for a drop-in center for young people, many of whom have children, about what she would need for her child and what those folks would maybe respond to for their children. So we got that in the development, but not since the guide has actually been out. We haven't received that feedback. And I put both of our emails into the chat a little while ago. I forgot to put the contact slide up at the end. And you can contact either one of us with feedback. We want to have feedback. We're developing an accompanying training curriculum, like a slide deck that will go with it. And folks have asked actually for a facilitator's guide about how do we use this if we're working with parents. How can we use this to do a workshop with parents and as part of parent education efforts? So if folks do access the guide and have some feedback for us, we would love to hear it. I'm not sure I got all 3 questions though.
Pretty good.
I think you checked all the boxes. So thank you, Renee. Put the link in the chat to
there it
order
is.
the guidebook as well. So great team
Awesome.
effort. Got all 3. To that point, Bob and Renee, I will put your emails into the follow-up email as well for people to reach out. Angie, 2-part question here that are completely unrelated. First of all, do you mind if I also share your contact information if folks have questions
Sure.
for you? Thank you. And then to sort of the chat that you're doing right now with Wally,
Yeah.
the initial question was who did the Arizona training website and how much did it cost? Extra points for it's pretty fancy comment there. And then there was a question about, are the costs proprietary?
Yeah, so I was just writing back to them. He's referring to the online training section, and that those online modules were created by Mindspace, which is an organization here in Tempe, and they do things for like Starbucks and Google. We were like one of their heart projects. And so they were really excited. Actually, they learned all about ACEs, which most of them didn't know anything about it. And so they really, I can't remember what the costs were, to be honest with you. I know it was a bit, it wasn't a little bit of money. I did just ask him for a quote for a whole entire different thing we're doing, because we're partnering with Prevent Child Abuse Arizona on creating a mandatory supporter training. Nice. So this is an adjunct training that would go with the mandatory reporter training on how can we support the families that don't need to be reported, instead of using our Department of Child Services as a catch-all. And so we looked at what that would cost to put that as an online training, and the quote that we received was around $40,000. So.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions that folks in the crowd have? At this point, feel free to come off mute if you have any. I've been taught to count to 10 in my mind when to give full opportunity for folks to air questions, but hearing none, we're pretty close to right on time. So Bob, Renee, Angie, thank you so much for the work you do and for being on with us today and presenting. For everybody that's been on the call, thank you for the work that you do as well. We'll continue making the world a better place, one community at a time, one state at a time, one region at a time. Coming together like this every month is truly one of the best parts of this job. And I'm grateful for all of you for being on the call. We'll be in touch with follow-up information, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything in between. But we really hope to see you next month for the November CTIPP CAN Call. So for now, thank you, be well, and keep doing great work.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jesse. Good job.
Yeah, thanks for what you guys do to make this happen every month.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.